Thank you, Joe. Like she said, if I tell you to do it, do it. So I want everybody to reach in their pocket and pull out a $20 bill and pass it up to the front. You can write your name and email address on the back if you want. How many people here have achieved all the success they want to achieve in life? Anybody? You're sort of tapped out in success, you just can't handle any more of it? Anybody here feel like you might have a little bit more left to go? You have some success you'd like to achieve? Yeah. Me too. Me too. I'm not quite there yet. I'm happy with what I've accomplished, but there's a lot more I want to accomplish. Anybody here have any dreams they haven't fulfilled yet? Yeah, me too. You know, an interesting thing happens in life. I've heard about it, and then all of a sudden it happens to you. You reach this point in your life. You get up one morning and you go out to the mailbox and there's a letter that gets sent to you. And it's got 4 little letters on it, an acronym, that sort of makes you feel the way the acronym sounds. You look at the return address and it says, Art. Anybody, has anybody received that letter? Art? How did they know? How did they know? I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. Art. What a distinguished organization. Art. There's a certain aspect to mortality that hit me at that point. You know, it's like, wait a second. I'm looking back and I'm looking forward and I'm trying to figure out which has more road on it. And when you're young, you know, you got your whole life ahead of you. And there's nothing but time. Do you guys remember when a day lasted all day? Remember when you were a kid and you got up on Saturday and it was just like, Saturday! And now you're like, what happened? Well, it's Monday morning. What happened? See, and I have a whole philosophy on that. See, the way time works is time works in percentages. That's it, right? So when you're like 1 year old, another year is 100%. Yeah? But when you're 50, another year is 2%. So it goes, bing, slides by. And when I look back, as I look back across my life, and like everybody, I've had ups and downs. You know, I think some people have looked at me. You know, I'm sort of a clean-cut guy and stuff. Don't have a lot of scars on my face, tattoos, piercings, anything like that. You know, don't have any felonies that I'm carrying around or anything like that. But a lot of people I've talked to sort of looked like, well, you've never had a bad day in your life. Who are you talking to? I've had plenty of bad days. Plenty of disappointments. A lot of baggage. A lot of regrets. A lot of things I wish I'd done differently. And it's all great speech material. It's all great speech material. That's another seminar I'll get into. But there's times I have to ask myself, how did I get here? How did I get here? What happened that I wound up here today? At Glendale Community College, Glendale, California, on a rainy day talking to you. What happened? There were certain sequences that occurred in life. There's been a number of times I've looked at situations and I go, how did I wind up here? I'm a kid that grew up in this little tiny town in rural Indiana. My family lived there for about 100 years. We had a family farm that went back to 1840. I think just after Indiana became a state. And I'm like, as a kid, I can remember places like Hollywood, the movies, California. That's for those other people. I don't deserve that. You know, that's for the, you know, I'm growing up, if you've ever listened to Garrison Keillor and the viewpoint of Lake Wobegon, you know, we don't deserve those things in life. That's sort of the viewpoint I had. I was up in Santa Clarita on the 2nd of January watching the Rose Bowl. You know, and it was a beautiful day on the 2nd of January, and I can remember sitting at my grandparents' house in Indiana with 8 feet of snow outside and 5 degrees and watching the Rose Parade and the Rose Bowl, and that was for somebody else. That wasn't for me. So I grew up, I had a good childhood. I grew up with I had a large family. There's 6 kids in the family. They're all boys. Wow. Except 5 of them. I was a middle child. That's why I'm so well-rounded. And my dad wanted to make sure that we were productive, and I did. I had what I call sort of a Waltonian childhood. If you ever watched the movie The Waltons, that's sort of what my family was like. We all sat around the table every night, had dinner, held hands, said grace, took care of each other. We didn't say goodnight to each other throughout the house or anything like that. And my dad wanted to make sure that we were productive, so he built a barn and he put about 6 or 8 horses in it, and we got to take care of those. So my first job in life was on the long end of a shovel. Now, there's a benefit to shoveling horse manure, I found out when I was about 10 years old. And that was that as we had an old 46 Willys Jeep. You know what that is, right? And I got to drive the Jeep whenever I wanted when I was about 10, 11 years old. Now, do you guys remember when you got to learn to drive? Did anybody learn to drive before they went to driver's ed, early in life? Is anybody excited about learning to drive? Yeah. Remember learning to drive a stick shift? Yeah. Boy, I tell you, my dad was teaching me on an old Ford pickup truck, and it had about it seemed like a 2.5 foot swing for the clutch. And I thought we were going to have to go back and get another truck. I shook that thing so bad. I can't even shake the truck like that now. But I got that Jeep, and my dad said you can drive it as much as you want, as long as there's a manure spreader hooked behind it and it's full of manure. And so I had that old Jeep, and I used to take that thing. We only had a 3-acre field beside our house, but boy, I'd come home after school, and of course after a while he'd let me unhook the manure spreader. But I'd take that Jeep and I would fly around that field and burn a tank of gas out of it almost every day out of school. And we had about a 3% grade on a hill, and I was trying to jump that hill like the Rat Patrol. There's no way I was going to get that Jeep off the ground, but boy, I tried. I tried and I tried and I tried. And then my family had a milk and ice cream business, so I was unloading trucks all the time. And I remember at 14 years old, we'd unload the truck about halfway back, and then I'd have to go get one of the drivers to get an 18-wheeler and back it up so we could unload out of the side door, because we didn't want to carry the boxes all the way to the back of the truck. And so I was 14, I find this driver in the garage. I said, hey, would you back the truck up for us? And he walks over and he goes, why don't you do it? I said, well, I don't know how to drive that truck. Have you ever met somebody who's philosophically just brilliant, but they don't have any education? Matter of fact, education, I think, does more to kill philosophical brilliance than anything we can do. Right? This is just a good old boy. Just a good old boy, probably never graduated from high school. You know, he knew the way of life. He looked at me and he goes, well, you ain't going to learn any younger. And I got to tell you, I had a real hard time arguing with that. I ain't gonna learn any younger. He goes, get up in there. Now, he didn't go ask my dad. He didn't say, is it okay if I teach your 14-year-old son how to drive an 18-wheeler tractor trailer? Get up in there. He pulled me up in there, and it's 16 gears on the side here, and you have to release the brakes. Oh, that sounded cool, man. It's a cab over, right? So when you release the clutch, you go up about 2 feet, because the way that it's like riding a thing, you got this big air seat. I backed the truck up. When I was 14 years old, I got to learn how to drive an 18-wheeler tractor trailer. I could drive them around our lot. You know? Man, I was in heaven. And then I got my license. I remember we had a 1972 Vista Cruiser station wagon. Remember that? Had the glass up on top. My dad liked it was all 3 seats faced forward, so all the kids could face forward and nobody's looking out the back window, and we'd pack everybody in there and go on vacation. So that was the family car. 1972 Vista Cruiser station wagon. I get into it with my mom. We're driving down the street in front of my house, and my mom says, I don't feel like I'm in the car with a new driver. Because my 2 sisters were quite something to drive with. I was in the back seat. I know what it was like. Laughing. Anyway, I said, you know what, Mom, I've been driving for years. Confident as I could be. Absolutely confident as I could be. Well, about 6 months later, I have to tell you a travesty that happened to me. I didn't think I was ever going to overcome it. Remember the fuel shortage back in the 70s? A few of you are old enough to remember that, right? Because you got your letter, so I know you're old enough. You laughed at that point, so I know you're old enough to remember the fuel crisis. Well, I was afraid that we were going to run out of gasoline and I wasn't going to get to drive. That was a legitimate fear. We're going to run out of gasoline and I'm not going to get to drive. And the state of Indiana lowered the speed limits from 70 to 55 on March 1st, 1974. I got my driver's license on March 2nd. I've looked. I think it's in the Bill of Rights, but I haven't been able to find it yet. But I think there's it's a fundamental right that we're allowed to drive 70 miles an hour. But I felt that way. I was getting cheated out of driving the car 70 miles an hour. All through driver's ed and with my learner's friend, I was driving 70 miles an hour. 55, who came up with that stupid rule? Picked up my girlfriend one night and two of my best friends in the Vista Cruiser station wagon, pulled out on Highway 40, headed west. Dark October night, slightly raining, no moon, no street lights. I'm zipping down the road at my God-given right of 70 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone. No cars around. Going along, all of a sudden a car on the right-hand side of the road flashes their brights at me. What are they doing on the right-hand side of the road, and I don't have my brights on? So I flash my brights back at them. I don't have my brights on. They flash their brights back at me again. I go, what's going on? I said I didn't have my brights on. I flash my brights back at them. And I see an 18-wheeler tractor trailer across all 4 lanes.
Oh, boy.
And what happened? A guy lived there, and he's backing his truck out of his driveway. Now, am I close enough for those headlights to hit that truck? I'm not close enough to stop. And I can remember thinking, they didn't tell me about this in driver's ed. On the right is a big ditch. And in that ditch is a couple feet of water, and up the other side of the ditch are some big telephone poles. On the other side, on this side, there's some concrete culverts as I'm looking, and I'm trying to figure out where to go. The ditch is probably going to be worse than hitting the truck, and I don't know what to do. And I don't even have time to, vote. Anybody here have a good idea? I'm open for suggestions. So I'm standing on the brakes, and the only thing I think I can do is I try to thread the needle. Now, threading the needle means I'm putting 2 wheels down in the ditch, and I'm going to try to skim by the front of this truck. Now, it came out of a driveway, right? So the driveway is banked. There's a big metal pipe that goes under that driveway. So when I put those 2 wheels down in the ditch, it banks me into their driveway at 45 miles an hour. And they have a gravel driveway, and the cars spin sideways, and we go right up to the garage door and stop about 1.5 feet from it. Oh my God. Dust flying every place. You stop, everybody okay? Yeah, I'm fine, okay. So I know I'm in trouble. All right, I'm 16 years old. I just almost hit that truck and wrecked the car. Now here's what I didn't realize. The guy flashing his lights at me didn't know I was 16 years old. All he knew was that they were backing a truck out in the middle of the road, and a car's come along and they can't get it stopped. They know they're doing something wrong, but at 16, I'm used to getting in trouble. Weren't you? Right? So what happens, I get out of the car and this guy comes running over, and I'm thinking, oh man. And he goes, that's the most incredible driving I've ever seen in my entire life. Good every day. Yeah? Just lucky. I was just lucky. That's what it was. Really lucky. I went home that night and I told my dad what happened. And I told my dad for 2 reasons. One is I had a very good relationship with my parents. Really did. And we were able to talk through almost anything that came up. The second reason I told him is I lived in a very small town, and if I didn't tell him, somebody else sure was going to tell him, right? My dad made a very interesting statement to me. That was a few years ago, Some of us, it was just the other day, he said this to me. 16 years old, I thought he didn't reprimand me, didn't take the car away from me, didn't tell me I was stupid, didn't tell me to behave myself. He said, well, that's why they have higher insurance rates for drivers with less experience. Less experience? What are you talking about? Man, I've been driving for 6 years. I've been driving since I was 10 years old. What do you mean less experience? I know how to handle a car. What do you mean I don't have experience? I didn't say that. I thought it. I thought it. But that statement stayed with me. And I realized next time somebody flashes their brights at me from the right-hand side of the road, maybe they're not trying to tell me that my brights are on. Just a thought. Now, lo and behold, the next week, I'm out with a couple buddies. We're coming into one of those little Midwestern towns where the highway goes from 4 lanes down to 2 lanes and goes through this little maple tree lined street. Little town about 4 or 5 blocks named Pershing. And as my God-given right gives me, I was going probably 45 and a 30, coming down into town. And all I saw was a flashlight flicker across the front of the road. That's all I saw. And I decided to slow way down because I didn't know what was there. I saw the flashlight flicker. What had happened was a drunk driver, just a minute before me, had gone into town and hit a tree and bounced out and was blocking both lanes. And someone came running out of their house with a flashlight, and as they crossed the street to see what was going on, it happened to flash across the highway, and I saw it. So I slowed way down and came in. Had I not had that experience the week before, had I not had my father say, well, that's why they have higher insurance rates, people with less experience, had I not realized that maybe there was something else I could learn, I probably would have zipped right in there at 45 miles an hour thinking I knew it all and done a lot of damage to myself, my friends, and probably that intoxicated man in his car. It could have been a whole different life for me had I not just listened, but had I not had those experiences as they add up. A couple other things that had happened I want to share with you. I have a passion for adventure, in all honesty. The thing probably that scared me most, people, what's your biggest fear? My biggest fear was sitting in some office at some desk for 40 years. And that's the only view of the world I ever got. And when I was 14, I talked my dad into sending me to a leadership school out in Telluride, Colorado. Which is like an outward bound program. 5 months, or 5 weeks, it was just 5 months, 5 weeks out in the Colorado Rockies learning climbing skills and rafting and snow schools and everything. And then you get out there. And one of the first things they have us do is climb up this snowfield and they chop an edge in it, and then you got to slide down it and stop yourself, arrest yourself with an ice axe. And the last one you got to do, you have to go down feet first, stomach first, head first, and learn how to spin. The last one, you stand there on this ledge, and somebody stands behind you, and they push you backwards over them, and you got to do backward somersaults. And I'm scared to death. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Why'd I come out here? I wish I was sitting in Indiana. I get up there and they push me backwards over this guy and I do a couple somersaults and I applied what I learned, pulled myself around, got my feet down, got stopped. And of course they gave you a nice incentive to do that. The end of the snowfield were all these big rocks you'd hit if you didn't stop. So I'm going, that was the coolest thing I've ever done. And I go running back up. Now you're at altitude. I'm up at like 13,000 feet and I'm running back up to do it again and they're all coming down. They said, no, you waited till the last one. We're done doing it today. Oh man, well the next school we went to, the weeks were divided into schools. It was a climbing school. They found this slab of rock, about 150 feet tall, on the side of this mountain. It starts out with this nice big crack in it and stuff, and you start climbing up, and as it goes up, little holes get tinier and tinier and tinier and tinier. And I get about 15 feet from the top, and I'm looking around going, I gotta get a magnifying glass out to figure out where I can stick my finger or stick my toe in something. And you're looking behind you, and you're up there. Of course, you're on a belay, right? And I remember I reached up to the top of this slab, and I pulled myself up like I'm getting out of a swimming pool, and the camp director's standing there looking at me, and he goes, okay, that was pretty good, but go down, drop back down the last 15 feet and climb it again. I was just glad to be at the top. I'm done. I don't have to do that anymore. He goes, no, because you didn't climb the last 15 feet. Go back down, drop back, the toughest part. So they lowered me back down, and I had to climb. So I get up there again, I'm sweating, and I'm almost in tears. I'm sick to my stomach. I'm scared to death. He goes, Lance, go back down and climb it again. They lowered me back down again. Now, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I'm going to admit that. I mean, I was 9 years old when I found out who Santa Claus really was. It took me 12 years, 13 years before I won the world champion of public speaking. But after 3 times getting low down, I started to figure out that the only way I'm getting off this rock is to climb it. But here's what changed. When I finally climbed up like I was supposed to, I was totally willing to go back down and do it again. I had a whole different feel about myself because I was competent. I wasn't scared trying to get off the rock. I knew I could handle it at that point. And he looked at me and he says, okay, good, go on. he got what he wanted out of the leadership school, which was not to be a great rock climber. It was to have the viewpoint that you can overcome the barrier that you're up against. And when I went back to Indiana, after that, I would run into situations that my friends would get totally stumped by. And I go, this isn't a big deal. You know, let me tell you about the time I was hanging on the side of a mountain, curled up around a rock in a rainstorm, getting, free. This isn't bad. Let's go. I got something to compare. I've been through worse than this. Now, we've all had experiences like that. It's not just me, but that was one of those things. But the only way I got to do that, I can remember, is I was 14, and the camp was for kids from 14 to 18. And most of the kids were 16, 17, and 18. Now, you know the difference between being 14 and 16? Remember percentages? That's a pretty big percentage. The other thing is, a lot of the kids that went to that camp were problem kids that their parents were trying to get handled. So I go from this Waltonian childhood with 5 sisters to a camp with a bunch of juvenile delinquents, basically, to a certain degree. But we were all thrown out in the wilderness to get along together and everything, and it was a great experience. But the only way I was able to do that was I had to go to my dad, and I had to talk him into sending me to this camp. I have about 5 members of my family that fly, and I always had a passion for flying, but it always seemed to be a dream that was way out there. It took 9 months to get your pilot's license. Oh my gosh, studying something for 9 months? I don't think I could do that. I'm a freshman in college. I see a little ad at Michigan State in the state news, and it says, "Come flying with us, Wing Spartans Flying Club." January 1977. 25 degrees below zero outside. East Lansing, Michigan. I bundle up in my Arctic parka and I march off to the union hall, the student union, to go to this meeting. I get in there and I find out that the ground school's already started for that month. And I almost turn around and walk away, or for that term. I almost turn around and walk away, but I happen to talk to one of the instructors. And he goes, "Oh, you don't have to. This is a club. You don't have to do the ground school. We can start flying. We can get you flying right away and then just pick up the ground school the next time." I said, "Great." So he goes, "Well, let's just get you up in the air." Okay. So I started flying. And was it 9 months? I told you I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. It was 11 months later I got my pilot's license. But the thing was, I would have never gotten that if I hadn't seen that ad and said, "Well, let me walk over there and see what's going on." 25 people are going, "You're going outside?" They said, "Oh, it's just a mile and a half." That's about how far I walked to school as a kid. And we used to walk to school in 20-degree below weather all the time. It's not a big deal. Let's just go, run over there. So I was able to do that. I love sailing is another thing I love. So Michigan State, once again, I have a buddy of mine in college, and we're talking about maybe we could go down to the Caribbean during spring break and we could work on a charter boat for a week and learn how to sail a big boat. I was used to sailing boats like 14 feet, little sunfish or something, but I didn't want to sail a big boat. And we just talked about it. We dreamed about it. Never did anything about it. We just talked about it, dreamed about it, talked about it, dreamed about it. We never went down to the Caribbean and got on a boat. But what did happen is he brings the newspaper over once again. He says, "There's a little classified ad in this. Says, St. Thomas to Stavanger, sailing trip. June to August, 1978. This number." He goes, what should we do? I said, "Well, let's call it." So I called the guy. It's right there in East Lansing. He goes, "Yeah, maybe down at this bar." We went to a bar, had a beer, said, "We're in." Got on a 8-week trip across the Atlantic, the North Atlantic, from St. Thomas and the Virgin Islands all the way to Stavanger, Norway. Sailed right through Loch Ness. As a kid, I used to look at National Geographic with this castle, with the Loch Ness Monster there. You remember that castle I'm talking about? I sat on top of that castle at dusk, which is about 11:30 at that time of the year. And you know what I asked myself? How did I get here? How did I get here? This is some place that I thought was out of my reach. It was way, way, way beyond what I could ever hope. How am I sitting on top of this castle I used to look at in National Geographic after I'd gone through all the naked natives? Well, the way I did it, I picked up the phone and I called somebody. That's what I did. Picked up the phone, I communicated, and I called somebody. And I was willing to take a little bit of a risk. All these different things. It's interesting because I did that and wound up moving to California 1984, left the family business. It was, that was probably the toughest decision I ever had. I wound up moving with a couple college buddies out in Manhattan Beach, and they had a loft over their garage. You store the suitcases in, and they said, well, we got room in the garage if you want to stay there. They didn't know what they were offering me. So I show up, go down to the lumber company, buy some drywall, finish the loft off, throw a carpet remnant up there. It's the coolest room in the house. Paying $200 a month, living in Manhattan Beach, and I end up getting a job with the Olympic Committee. I just go down into Long Beach to a testing center. There's usually a line out the door. For some reason, they must have heard I was coming, and nobody showed up that day. So I went up talking to a girl, and she goes, what's your experience? So I'm going through some of the experiences I've had. She goes, well, you've got a lot of management experience for your age. I'm 36 years old, but I've been managing things since I've been about 14, right? Nobody's there. I'm supposed to have a 20-minute interview. I have a 2-hour interview with her. Her husband's from Fort Wayne, Indiana. She goes, you're new out here, right? I said, yeah. She goes, well, we're having a party tomorrow. Do you want to come? Sure. Okay, so they had a Long Island iced tea and hat party. It was in Fullerton. Now, I got the map out, and Fullerton's only about that far away from Manhattan Beach. Because in Indiana, that's like just across town, right? I'm driving. And you know what? That trip home was a lot longer than the trip there. I had the windows down, singing everything I could, trying to stay awake after drinking about 15 gallons of Long Island iced tea, right? But I went to that party. I didn't have to go to the party. I could have hung out with my college buddies. So I was like, yeah, what the heck? I'll go meet some new people. They called a week later and they said, everybody remembered you. We need some more people at our level, at the executive level, to come in. Would you be willing to come in for an interview? So instead of being hired as a cleaner helper in a bus, which is what I was, whatever. I'd just like to do something with the Olympics. That'd be fun. I got hired at an executive level in the transportation department with the LA Olympic Committee. Why? Some communication skills, some experience that I had. I didn't, that experience changed my life tremendously. I wound up going to Nestle for a couple years. Does anybody here work for Nestle? They got a Toastmasters club there. I've been in there. And it was back when it was the Carnation building down. Nestle was just buying Carnation. That was last millennium. Okay, down in Wilshire. And I was on Friskies Dry Cat Food as a marketing assistant, and Carnation Instant Breakfast. I did the introduction of sugar-free instant breakfast. I'll give you autographs after this if you want. And also, just so you know, this is one of the defining moments in my life. While I was on the Friskies Dry Cat Food brand, we beat Purina Cat Chow, the #1 position in dry cat food. Now, I got to tell you something. That's something you want to tell your grandkids about. That, when you actually look at your life and you said, you know what I would accomplish? I sold more dry cat food than any other company in the United States. And those are things I was looking at. I said, I'm selling dry cat food. What am I doing? And I'll be honest, I spent 2 years at Nestle. It wasn't my environment. It really was not where I worked very well. And I left there, and I did a couple years in the Anheuser-Busch doing sports marketing, which was just fun. I mean, I'm hanging out at the Long Beach Grand Prix in the pits, getting paid to be there, while all these other people are on the other side of the fence. And I'm drinking free beer, hanging out with Bobby Rahal and the bus and stuff, and the hydroplane races down in Mission Bay, and the Solana Beach Triathlon, and Frank Sinatra and Liza Minnelli concert at the Forum. All these things I got to do. And again, I'm picturing myself, how did I get here? I'm an old kid in Indiana, how did I get here? And then I go, these big companies really aren't where I want to be. I don't know what I want to do in my life. And about that time, Toastmasters came along. I did like speaking. So I started speaking out a little bit. And Bill Moon, right down there, Bill and I were a part of a group called Citizens for an Alternative Tax System. We actually were part of an organization. Bill did the economic studies, and I was the national spokesperson for a concept which is called the fair tax. And I started doing radio shows all over the United States on doing away with income taxes, replacing with a national sales tax. I'm not here to get political on you, but it was a fascinating experience. I do believe that we should be able to keep the money we earn, that's all. A little philosophical point. I do feel that we should have a fair tax system that doesn't cost us more to comply with than they collect in tax. Just a little concept. I'm not going to go political on you. But the other thing, no. Okay, so I got PR trained on how to do interviews and be on television and how to do the sound bites and do all that sort of stuff. Okay, so I'm going along in life, you know, I'm doing Toastmasters, and it's like we decided to build our club, and we're building the club and having great wins in it and things. And lo and behold,
I think I can get by here.
a continent away, a bunch of people in France, not a bunch, a small group of people in France, on Christmas Eve in Parliament, passed a law that outlaws 187 religions in France. You know, outlaws, you're not allowed to practice that religion. My religion is one of them, along with 186 others. Major religions, Baptists, Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, Shia Muslims, Sunni, whatever. There were all sorts, there's a whole list. And so there was a foundation put together called the International Foundation for Human Rights and Tolerance, and they wanted to promote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that the United Nations had, that all these nations had signed. At the same time, Germany's passing laws that are outlawing people with certain ethnic backgrounds from holding state jobs, having bank accounts, and sort of a return to the 30s, but it's very quiet. We're not hearing about it here in the United States, but the groups over there are very concerned about it. And the foundation comes to me and they say, Lance, I want to do a marathon across Europe, running a torch. Starting in England, heading 8 countries, I calculated I was about 2,000 miles. I want you to be the captain of that team. And I'm going, well, I can't take that kind of time off. I'll help you plan it. And you know what they said? Never had this said to me in my entire life. Someone had read a bio of some of the things I'd done. I was literally going, well, I'm sure you've got better qualified people to do this than me. I don't think I could do that, but boy, what an adventure. I love that part of it. And they looked at me and they said, we don't have anybody with your qualifications. Now, I'm honest, I have never had that said to me in my entire life. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, reading your bio, you've got public relations experience, you've got excellent organizational and executive experience, you've twice hitchhiked across Europe on $5 a day, you've sailed across the Atlantic, you've got the expedition experience that we need, you've been in very heated political battles on the public relations stuff, which is what we need. We don't have anybody with your diverse background. Now, at this point, all I'm feeling is that I have this splattering of experience. It's not really good to anybody, but I've had sort of a fun time doing it. And I can, you don't have anybody with my experience. So I wound up running 2,000 miles across Europe with a ragtag team of runners and no money, selling t-shirts to put gas in the tanks of the vans, doing speeches in town squares with all these groups that would come together, standing up in a pair of running shorts and a t-shirt, supporting religious freedom for everybody and human rights for everybody, fighting that. And I go sitting there going, how did I get here? How did I get, I never thought, I'm a kid from Indiana. What in the world am I doing running across Europe? I was in Oslo, Norway, and we had 6 of us. 3 guys went out to go do some media, and the other 3 of us went to meet with government officials, right? And so we went to the mayor's office, we went and met with the mayor and gave him material, and we got our banners and our flags and our t-shirts and our running shorts. It was hysterical. We go to the governor for that state in Norway. We go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and meet with them. And we get out, we're looking for another place, and the palace is up on the hill, and I looked at John Spencer, a buddy of mine. I said, hey, John, you want to go up and see if the king's home? He goes, yeah, let's do that. We're walking up there, and I said, He's from Michigan. He's from around Lansing, Michigan. I said, John, when you were growing up, did you ever think you'd be in Oslo, Norway? And you'd say, you want to go up and see if the king's home? Can you come out and play? And you'd say, yeah, and not even give it a thought like, well, I don't know, should we or shouldn't we? Yeah, and he goes, we stopped. We're standing on this hill looking and going, I never thought I'd be saying that. And we went up there and the king wasn't home. But you know what? They said, you need to talk to the crown prince. Because the king doesn't do those things, the crown prince does. We're going, is the crown prince home? They said, we're sorry, the crown prince isn't home, but let's get you his executive secretary down to meet with you and see what we can do. We went in the back security area where they had all the TV cameras and stuff. We're standing in there. This lady comes out, we meet with her, we exchange information. I get back, how did I get here? How did this happen? Okay. Now today, I get up every day and I look back. Did anybody get I sent an email out with my Jimmy Buffett song, Changes in Latitude. Some of you guys get that? I put a video together of all the places, of all the places I went last year. I was on the road 26 weeks. I was in Australia 3 times, 2 weeks once, 3 weeks twice. I got to dive the Great Barrier Reef. I got to climb to the top of the Harbor Bridge. That's just between talks, right? I was in Sweden, I was in the Netherlands, all over the U.S., I was in the Bahamas and the Cayman Islands, zipping around. You know? I'm going, pinch me, how am I doing this? Right? Well, what it came back to was when I came into Toastmasters, I looked at it and I said, this is something I want. Now, I'm not a guy that did a competent communicator in 3 years. I'm a guy that did 3 competent communicators in a year, or a competent communicator and 2 advanced communicators in a year. When I won the World Championship, I had done 17 competent communicators and I had done 2 AC Golds when I won. When I calculated how many speeches in Toastmasters I gave at the time that I won the World Championship, I had spoke on an average of once every 2.3 weeks. And how did I do that? I had the opportunity because of Toastmasters. I had the opportunity to do that because I put myself into speaking. Now, all that was not in the club. I took every opportunity I could to speak outside of the club. As a matter of fact, when I lost in 2004 at division, okay, and boy, I'd been to regionals the year before twice, and then I lose a division. That was like a mule kicked me in the chest, knocked the wind down. But you know what I said? I just went, you know what? I kept trying to get this thing. Kept trying to get this black badge. Once I get the black badge, I can go out and speak. I can be somebody, right? I remember looking at that. I was so sick and tired of losing speech contests at that point. And I said, badges? I don't need no stinking badges, man. I went out and got a job speaking in the evenings for a financial services company. I spoke to seniors that came for a free chicken dinner. You guys have been to some of my seminars. Free chicken dinner. Come for an hour and a half. Talk about inflation, interest rates. Pretty exciting stuff. And I got paid $300 every time I did it. And you know, sometimes they give me places out in Palm Desert or Visalia, Morocco. No, they didn't give me some Morocco. But I would have to drive sometimes 2-3 hours to get there. Get there an hour early, get set up, do the seminar, stay and eat my chicken dinner. Yes, I'll speak for food. Drive home. I'd spend 8 or 9 hours to earn $300. And for those of you that want to be a professional speaker, that's not uncommon. But you know what? I was happy as I could be. I was so happy. How did I get the job? I spoke every single place I could, and people got to know me speaking. And one of the agents knew me and knew I was a speaker and said, we're looking for a speaker for our company. He said, you would do great at it. You want to interview for it? I said, yes. So I sent him some stuff, some material. I say, I'm a speaker. The only way I did that was I had the opportunity from the amount of speaking I did. How did I get there? You know, the first year in that job, I earned an extra $11,000. Is there anybody here that couldn't use an extra $11,000? I wasn't supporting myself as a speaker, but I started. I didn't need any badges. I didn't need anybody's permission. How did I do that? Again, 17 CCs, 2 AC Golds, being District 52 conference chair, being an area governor, being a president, being every post in the club, getting my confidence that I could do something. Now, what I started to realize when I look back, one of the things that I see with people is that how they do Toastmasters many times is how they live their life. And they sort of come and they sit in the club and they go, well, that's sort of nice. You know, sort of cool. Nah, I don't think I could, I don't want to be an officer, no, but I should like coming hanging out. And then you look at how they live their life, and it's like, that's what they do in their life. You ever notice people like that? You have other people that they're real go-getters. Now for me, I wanted to shift gears. I was trying to find a path in life that I loved, that I got up every morning and I wanted to do. To me, there are 2 conditions in life. There's living and existing. And I'll tell you, existing has a lot of 4-letter words associated with it. Words like slow, words like wait, Words like hope. All right? And there's one word that's not associated with living, and that is sleep. When you're living, you don't sleep. It's fast, it's passionate, it's hot, it's moving. And I never remember that great night's sleep I got back on April 7th, 1984. Do you remember that? Man, I got like 9 hours. Oh, man, fantastic. I never remember that. But you know what I remember? I remember cycling from the Russian border to Helsinki, 100K after I hadn't slept for 42 hours. I remember that. And I remember my senses being wide open, going, how did I get here? How am I doing this? That's living. And I give myself a test every morning I wake up. And here's the test. When I wake up, am I more excited to get out of bed and go do what I'm going to do, or stay in bed? It has nothing to do with how tired you are. You can be totally exhausted and be excited to get out of bed, right? But there have been a lot of years of my life, I sat there and that alarm went off, and I hit the snooze button and just went, oh, I don't want to go out and face the day. Oh, I wish I could have slept. I was so happy to be asleep. You don't have to raise your hands. Anybody had that feeling? You're so happy to be asleep. I had one of these life-changing moments. And if you get nothing else out of this talk, get this. If you want to achieve your dreams, you've got to wake up. You've got to be awake. And what we look at in life, and what I see Toastmasters does, there's this transition that happens to all of us. Okay. Anybody here grow up in a family? Okay. Question. Did your parents ever tell you what to do? Did you ever disagree with them? Who won? They did, right? Until you're about 16. Anybody go to school? Were you told what seat you had to sit in? At what time? Were you told what you had to learn? And worse yet, were you told what you had to spit out on a piece of paper to go to the next level? Yep. And what happened if you didn't spit it out on the piece of paper like they wanted it? You got to stay there until you did what they wanted, right? Now, I'm not against education. I do think our education system's in a mess, but I'm not going to go political on it. But the point is, we spend the formative years of our life being told what to do by other people. Now, that's not totally wrong, but there is a thing called free will that we all have. And there's a transition we go through. And that transition happens when we start to get out of school, we start to go to work, and we start to take control of our own life. We get so conditioned that somebody else is there telling us what to do, that we start to question our own ability to think, our own ability to create, our own ability to be the masters of our own destiny. We're always looking for somebody else's approval. I'm saying we because I know exactly what that's like, because I was doing the same thing. I was taking jobs based on, to a certain extent, the fact that I would think my friends and family would approve of the job I took. Not that I want to go sail across the ocean, have adventures, and I don't really care what anybody else thinks. I was not that free of an individual. I keep thinking I'm through the transition, and I find other areas of my life where I'm allowing that other influence. I'm waiting for someone else to solve it, someone else to handle it. The thing that Toastmasters gave me was when I started working the club and doing my speeches, there was nobody else that gave me a speech topic. And I didn't think I had speech topics for a number of years, but I'd come up with a topic and people would go, wow, that really made a difference in my life. I did. I didn't think I could really lead well. I'd always had somebody else above me that was there to catch me or there to give me the direction if I was going to screw up. I got into Toastmasters and they just let me screw up. All over the place. Got to make all sorts of mistakes. But like driving that car and threading the needle, it gave me the experience that I needed. So when I got into the real situation out in life, I had the experience of making a mistake in Toastmasters. And I was able to be more successful in life. I had the confidence that I could go into a business and that I could make a difference. I could organize the sales team and I could get them to win. Why? Because I organized my Toastmasters club and I got people to win. I learned how to do that. I discovered my own leadership skills. I didn't read some book that said this is what you have to be a leader, and I go, okay, I will do that to be a leader now. Okay, listen to me, all you humanoids. This is what I need you to do. No, I learned that if you want people to be their best, you got to bring the best out in them. If they're doing things you don't like, don't necessarily talk about that. Talk about the things they're doing that you like. I even did an international speech and won it on validating what is right in people and bringing that out in them. I learned that that's how I actually manage people and I work with people. I learned my skills, what works for me. I was able to do it because of this Toastmasters organization. And what I realized that it was like an internship for my life. I got to come into Toastmasters, and people hear me talk about this. To me, it's like the holodeck on the Starship Enterprise. We all come to Toastmasters, we walk in a meeting, the holodeck goes up. We play this meeting, and all of a sudden, meeting's over, go back down, go back to work, right? But we get to get the experience, we get to get our voice out, find out what it's like. I'll guarantee you, 20 years ago, if you'd asked me to come up and speak like this, my kneecaps would be bouncing, I'd be losing my thoughts, and I wouldn't be able to see any of you. You'd be a blur. It'd be blurry. That was that way for a long time. I can remember faces appearing out of the blur of the audience when I was speaking. Where was my attention? My attention on what's my next word? What's my next word? Right? And now they're going, can you get them to sit down and shut up? Your Toastmasters Club, your success, is a direct reflection of your ability. My success is a direct reflection of my ability. And the only way it changes is by us picking up the ball, each one of us picking up the ball and winning it. Now a question, today's Saturday. There's a lot of things I could do on Saturday. I don't have to be here talking to you. Don't have to do that. I have a lot of options, a lot of choices I could be doing today. And the question is the choices I make, are they going to lead to my success? Being here today, is this going to make me more successful as an individual? Who determines that? Me. You being here today, is that going to make you more successful as an individual? Some of you yes, some of you no. You determine it. When you go have your Toastmasters Club, do you go, let's make this the best club we can? We only have 8 members. Okay. You know what? What a success story we're going to have when we have like 40 members in this club and we say we grew it from 8 members. Let's actually get rid of a couple and let's grow it from 4. Let's see if we can find a club that the charter's active, but there's nobody in it. And by golly, we'll have a story to tell then. Okay? You come in and you go, well, see, what I saw is that when I became enthusiastic and active and started winning in Toastmasters, it started to bleed over into the other areas of my life. And I'll tell you, my first 5 or 6 years in this organization, I would come to my Toastmasters meeting. It was the breath of fresh air in my week. I would get pounded in all week. You know what? Have you ever been around people you just feel like your space gets pounded in, you can't really talk, you can't really be there? And I would come to my Toastmasters meeting and I was able to stand up and I was able to communicate, and people said, we actually sort of like you. We enjoy having you around. I'm going, oh, it's so good to hear, because all week long, all I hear is how inadequate I am and how people are upset with everything that's going on in my life, or the person next to me, and they got to talk to me too. You know, customer complaints or frustrations, and I come back to my Toastmasters meeting and stand up and be big again, go out all week long. Come back in. My breath of fresh air, charging my batteries, right? And then this amazing thing started to happen. I started to go out in life and I'd make it a day or two, sort of big. Then I'd get pounded in, and before long I'm making it almost through the whole week. Right? And you just keep going along, and all of a sudden you get this confidence in you, and people, they ask you a question and you go, oh, I had a tougher one of that in tabletop. I'll answer that in 1.4 seconds. I won't even hit the green card on that one, okay? And life becomes this game. You get confidence in your communication. But what you have to do is you have to put that into Toastmasters, and you start springing out. And since we get out of school, in school we have these great learning opportunities. Yeah? Now I'll tell you the one thing that really ticked me off from school, other than having to sit there and spit that stuff out. You ever hear you learn from your mistakes? You made mistakes on the test, and the teacher goes, well, that's okay, you learn from your mistakes. Now, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I admit that. I'd say, okay, well, great, I learned, let me take the test over. No, you can't take the test over. You get the grade you got. But you need to learn from your mistakes. Wait a second. Let me make the mistake, but don't punish me for it. Let me take the test as many times as I need to learn to make the test right. Do you guys agree with that? Yeah. When I learned to fly, they didn't say, you know, Lance, you really should have screwed up that navigation. You're like 600 miles off. They're just going to give you a D and give you your pilot's license. They didn't say that. The instructor was there and goes, no, let's figure this out. You know, when I was learning to land the airplane, I hit the ground so hard, so many times, I thought we were going to have to go back and get another airplane. And then I went and read the manual. And I went, oh, that's how you land an airplane. And then I learned how to land it, right? But the point was I had to be able to free to make those mistakes. And in Toastmasters, you're free to screw up. You're free to make mistakes. Make them. Put your car in the ditch. Be willing to do that. Thread the needle. Go 75 and 55 in Toastmasters. There's no consequence. Push the edge of the envelope. And what you'll find is you'll start to gain the confidence to start pushing the edge of the envelope out into life. We have some issues on this planet, in this country, we need to handle, and we need some able people to stand up and have their voices be heard. Do you guys agree? Yeah. And most people are sitting there semi-hypnotized because their whole life they've been told where to sit and what to do, and they turn the TV on, and they're told what to think, and all the stuff's controlled, and you stand up and you have to come up with original thought in your own speech and realize that you have a viewpoint that you can, that's valuable and people like. That is something that is so needed, and there's no reason with that viewpoint we shouldn't have 40 and 50 clubs, members in every Toastmasters club. There's no reason, but the only person that can do it is you, just like the only person that can do it is me. So let's go out there, let's wake up, and let's achieve our dreams, and let's all get the success we all deserve.